That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, let's go through and let's dive into some wide receiver rankings. Hopefully this week the protocols don't mess everything up. Hopefully this week we actually get a lot of these star players good to go. I mean, if we're missing guys like Travis Kelce, if we're missing players like Austin Eckler, I think that we may have to put a massive asterisk next to this season. Like, this is the worst fantasy football stretch that I think I ever remember. I mean, especially week 15. I don't want to sit here and make excuses, but my God, Duke Johnson can't finish as the running back one for the week. And of course, please, before we dive into anything here, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment letting me know how stupid I am. I know everybody here is already subscribed to the channel. And also, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Go check out some of those drafts that we've been doing every single night on this channel. Also, go check out some of those player props that you know that we are all too familiar at losing money with. And when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK, they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. And if we hit 10,000 signups on Underdog Fantasy by the time that we have the Fantasy Flock Network meetup, they'll be able to fly multiple people down to our Fantasy Flock Network meetup on January 15th at 3 p.m. in Tampa, Florida. Of course, if you are in the Florida area, you better be having your butt there. We will have the address posted hopefully soon. Of course, I'll be on Twitter, Patreon, Discord. It'll be everywhere. But that should be it. Let's dive into the rankings. And at the very top, we need to do a better job of skimming through this. We're going to throw Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams up tier 1. Nothing to talk about. Do I have to say anything? They're dominant. They're very good. You play them every single week. You're probably in the fantasy football playoffs specifically because of Cooper Kupp. Next tier, let's go down to our wide receiver 3. And this is where we can begin to have some conversations. And I know a lot of people are not going to like this ranking. You know what? It is what it is. And if for whatever reason you dropped him earlier this year, shame on you. Antonio Brown will be our wide receiver 3 this week. Now, I understand it. Antonio Brown has not played in a very long time here. And it's almost unfair for Antonio Brown to come back at this point and for owners to be able to go through, pick him up off the waiver wire and be looking at a potential league-winning wide receiver. And I know a lot of people are going to think, well, this is way too aggressive for Antonio Brown. I am operating under the assumption that obviously you have no Chris Godwin, but also I'm assuming we have no Leonard Fournette and we have no Mike Evans. If Mike Evans plays this week, which there is that possibility, Antonio Brown will fall down these rankings, but he will still be a wide receiver 1 that you need to go through and play. And I do not think that this ranking of Antonio Brown is too aggressive at all. And that if you're looking at a per game standpoint this year, now, yes, it's off a very small sample. It's off a 5-game sample, way too small to just assume that this is what we would have seen all season. But Antonio Brown, I mean, was the wide receiver 6 on a per game basis. The last 3 weeks that we had from Antonio Brown, 11 targets, 8 targets, 13 targets, 63, 124, 93 receiving yards, 9 receptions. I mean, you were getting that elite level production from Antonio Brown in an offense that had both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. You remove both of those top options as well as Leonard Fournette, which, I mean, was the player that was second on this team in receptions so far this season. Antonio Brown looks like he is a guaranteed lock to get double-digit targets this week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're not expecting the Buccaneers to be the most productive offense in the NFL without their top-tier receivers, but you should be expecting that they're still far above average. Antonio Brown, our wide receiver 3, going up against the Carolina Panthers. And another thing is, with AB is, he's not necessarily coming back from the ankle injury. He's coming back from the suspension. That ankle should be 100% good to go. If you have Antonio Brown, please don't ask me on a single live stream if you should play him or not, because he's my wide receiver 3 this week. And our wide receiver 4 is going to be Keenan Allen. With Keenan Allen, we're going to have to monitor this situation in Los Angeles. You can move him up to wide receiver 3 if there's no Austin Eckler, because he would just get peppered with targets. Going to be going up against the Houston Texans. This team should be top 3 in the NFL in points scored. Obviously, the Houston Texans may just roll over. But if you don't have Austin Eckler, I think that it could be a spot where Justin Herbert in this offense just look to throw the ball and just easily win the game that way. And obviously, I mean, Keenan Allen's going to be running routes closer to the line of scrimmage, have those high percentage catches that'd be a little bit more favorable in a game that, you know, they're not going to be forced to push the ball aggressively down the field. And our wide receiver 5 here will be Justin Jefferson. Now, with Justin Jefferson, going to be going up against Jalen Ramsey this week. Not only will he be going up against Ramsey, but I think that you're also probably going to be getting Adam Thielen back. Let me pull up the last report that we've had Adam Thielen here, and I will say we're recording this on December 21st. So there's a good chance that by the time you're watching this video, we have more information on Adam Thielen. And of course, we will continue to go through and we will continue to live stream every single night to give you all those constant updates to answer your questions. But here with Adam Thielen, this is a wide receiver that was a game time decision in week 15. And if he was a game time decision in week 15 and he looks like he was that true game time decision, there's a chance that he plays against the Rams this next one, which would bump down Justin Jefferson just a little bit. And now let's go down to our next tier, wide receiver 6. Let's go over to one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Deontay Johnson going to be going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Pittsburgh Steelers are just going to have to throw the ball with Deontay Johnson. Yes, this past week, I mean, he just was a victim of a horrendous Pittsburgh Steelers offense. But beyond this, I mean, if you're just looking beyond this past week, I mean, this past week was the first week that he had with single-digit fantasy points at 9.8. One of the most consistent wide receivers in the NFL on a points-per-game basis. And then our wide receiver 7 will be A.J. Brown here. A.J. Brown should be coming back from the chest injury, going up against the San Francisco 49ers. I'm operating under the assumption that you have no Julio Jones this game. No Julio Jones. A.J. Brown should come in. He should have an elite target share right away. Now, my hesitation with A.J. Brown is A, very good San Francisco defense, and B, at the same time, I mean, it's his first week back from injury, so maybe they just look to ease him in just slightly. So he'll be our wide receiver 7. Our wide receiver 8 will be CeeDee Lamb going up against the Washington football team. With CeeDee Lamb here, he has been the consistent force in Dallas. If you're going to be looking at the target volume he's had, I mean, compared to Amari Cooper, who's been getting like 5 targets a week, CeeDee Lamb coming out here the past 3 weeks, 13, 10, and 9 targets. Now, I know he hasn't come away with the receiving touchdown in quite a while, so the fantasy production hasn't necessarily been where you'd want it to be, but this is still an extremely talented player in what should be a improved offense. I don't necessarily think their defense continues to come out and shut down opponents and allow them to just run the ball over and over and over as you've had over the past few weeks. So I think you will get a positive bump in regression for Dak Prescott, and hopefully CeeDee Lamb comes away with the touchdown. Now our last wide receiver in this tier, wide receiver 9. On paper, he's an alpha dominant wide receiver on an offense that's way better than Dallas, way better than Tennessee, way better than Pittsburgh. The issue is the matchup. We're going to go Stephon Diggs going up against the New England Patriots. The Patriots have been so damn good on defense as of late, specifically with their pass defense. I mean, if you go through and if you look at what this team has done, now, yes, they just let up 27 points against the Indianapolis Colts. That was all on the ground, essentially. I mean, if you looked at Carson Wentz, 57 passing yards. The week before, they played the Buffalo Bills, and I understand the weather made that game where it was really unbearable to watch. I understand that this was the weather game. Buffalo still only 10 points. The week before that, Tennessee, 13 points. The week before that, Atlanta, 0. The week before that, Cleveland, 7. Carolina, 6. I mean, the New York Jets, 13. Like, this is a top-tier defense. I think you have to push down Stephon Diggs with your expectations. Now let's go down to our next tier of receivers. Let's go over to our wide receiver 10, Deebo Samuel, someone that's getting a little bit more use as a running back. This is like the 4th straight week in a row that Deebo Samuel has more carries than he has targets. I mean, pretty damn funny. If you're looking at the past 4 weeks, he's had a combination of 7 receptions. And let's see how good my math is real quick. Looks like if you're doing the same thing with his carries, he's had 28 carries. So 28 carries and 7 receptions over the past month for Deebo Samuel. Pretty funny if you ask me. It doesn't really matter when he's getting into the end zone every single game. He's had 12 touchdowns so far through the first 15 weeks. Now this matchup against the Tennessee Titans, hopefully he gets used a little bit more as a receiver because they have a softer pass defense than a run defense. And then our next wide receiver here is going to be someone that I know has been, I don't want to say volatile. He missed last week, and he would have been in a great spot. We're going to go Jaylen Waddle at wide receiver 11. I mean, with Jaylen Waddle, he has trended in the right direction since Tua Tagovailoa has taken over. This is a rookie that is the wide receiver 17 on a per-game basis. And you have to remember, a lot of that was with Jacoby Brissett under center. I mean, remember the good old days for Miami when they were just strolling out Jacoby Brissett. And if you're looking at the target volume he's had over the past 3 weeks, he's been averaging 10 targets a game over the past 3. So, I mean, that's kind of the volume you're wanting to see. And he looks like he's one of the most impressive rookie wide receivers. The issue, going to be a tough matchup going up against the New Orleans Saints. And our next wide receiver here will actually be another rookie. It's going to be Jamar Chase going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Chase and Higgins were obviously disappointments this past week. I mean, you had a very tough matchup going up against the Denver Broncos. You shouldn't have been able to expect the Cincinnati Bengals to be that good at all. Now, they were worse than we were even expecting. I mean, with Jamar Chase, yes, he's going to have a low floor, as we've discussed time and time again, but he does have that elite ceiling demonstrated by the 200-yard game that he had earlier this season. And then our last wide receiver in this tier will be Tyler Lockett. Looking like Tyler Lockett's not going to play in this game that's going to kick off in about an hour. But with Tyler Lockett, before you had him missing this game with COVID, I mean, he was clearly the wide receiver 1 in Seattle. He was going out there and crushing DK Metcalf every single week. The matchup against Chicago, I'm not too worried about it at all. And now let's go down to our next tier. Let's go to our wide receiver 14. This will be Adam Thielen going up against the Los Angeles Rams. With Thielen, like I said, I'm expecting that he's going to play based on the fact that he was a game time decision this past week. And also you should get Jalen Ramsey lining up on Justin Jefferson. And you should have the Los Angeles Rams going through and leading the majority of this game, which will force the Minnesota Vikings to throw the ball. And our wide receiver 15 here is going to be Hollywood Brown going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, with Hollywood, he just continues to go out there and disappoints. I mean, this past week, he has 14 fantasy points. But what is hilarious, 14 targets. 14 targets, clearly the alpha wide receiver 1 in this offense. Now, the efficiency isn't necessarily there, but Lamar Jackson wasn't playing. I think Lamar Jackson should be good to go against the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a wide receiver that's had 121 targets through 13 games this year, so he's averaging 9 targets a game. I mean, assuming that we get Lamar Jackson back in, I'd be confident in playing Hollywood. And our next wide receiver will be DK Metcalf. With Metcalf, I don't want to speak on him. Full transparency, we're recording this right before kickoff of that Seattle Seahawks game. So with Metcalf, of course, we're going to have to go through and we're going to have to continue to update. And I will say, hopefully this doesn't turn off to be bad just tomorrow, but I'm expecting a massive game from Metcalf, knowing that you have no Tyler Lockett, even though it should be a tough matchup going up against Ramsey. I think that Metcalf, just based off target volume alone, should be dominant here. And our last wide receiver in this tier will be T. Higgins going up against the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, with T. Higgins, yeah, he had the disappointing week this past week, as well as Jamar Chase. I mean, he only comes away with a total of 4 fantasy points off of 3 targets. You get Tyler Boyd with the long touchdown here. I think this will be a bounce-back game against the Baltimore Ravens. If you're looking at the Ravens, they are the number 1 team in the NFL against the run, and they are the 31st team in the NFL against the pass. This should be a game where you get the Cincinnati Bengals throwing it over and over and over again. So I think you can go through and you can play both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, hoping for that bounce-back. Now let's go down to our wide receiver 18. Someone else that's playing today, going to be Terry McLaurin going up against the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys defense has been elite as of late. With Terry, I'm expecting that he comes out and he just gets back to averaging over 25% of his team's targets. I mean, we've seen him before go out there in very bad offenses, be able to command that elite level target share. Not expecting him to be a wide receiver 1, expecting him to be a mid wide receiver 2 nonetheless, even though this is a tougher matchup. And then our next wide receiver in this tier, we'll only have 2 wide receivers in this tier, is going to be Amari Cooper. With Amari, he's been extremely inconsistent. You don't need me to tell you that. I mean, this is a player that will go out there and get 19 targets one week, and then he'll get 5 targets the next. He'll drop you 40 fantasy points one week, and then he'll drop you 5 fantasy points the next. It's disappointing. The matchup against Washington, I still think that there's room for this Dallas Cowboys offense to just have to throw the ball a little bit more if this defense doesn't come out and this defense isn't elite as you've seen over the past month. Now let's go down to our next tier of guys, and let's go over to, the new Hunter Renfrow, what we've been saying for almost a month now. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 20. This is someone that, without TJ Hawkinson, without DeAndre Swift, you have to be extremely excited about. A great matchup at the same time. 3 weeks in a row where he's had double-digit targets. We've been talking about it for a month. I don't know what else we need to say. He's just that slow slot wide receiver that can generate separation, that is going to be able to command volume whenever TJ Hawkinson is not operating over the middle of the field. We'll have Amon-Ra St. Brown in a plus matchup here at 20, and we'll have his clone, Hunter Renfrow at wide receiver 21. Now with Hunter Renfrow, Going up against Denver, going to be a brutal matchup. And also, the reason we have Hunter Renfrow here is I'm concerned that you may have Darren Waller coming back in. Now, if Darren Waller comes back in, I'm actually probably going to be dropping Hunter Renfrow down another tier. If Darren Waller's out, I actually think you can move Hunter Renfrow up into the same tier as Terry McLaurin and Amari Cooper. So this is a nice middle ground for him currently while we wait for a report on Darren Waller. Then our next wide receiver in this tier is going to be Brandon Ayuk going up against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, as you've seen Deebo Samuel transition over to being a little bit more of a wide receiver, you've seen Ayuk get more and more involved in this offense this past week against the Falcons. He gets nothing, but that was because this team did not have to go out there and throw the ball at all. I mean, they just went and ran it 30 plus times with Jeff Wilson this past week. I mean, this game against Tennessee should be a lot closer. Let me go through and see if there are lines out right now. I would imagine the line for this game, let me take a guess. And I know this means nothing because obviously I could be staring at it right now. I would guess that the 49ers are 4.5 point favorites. But we were wrong. They are 3.5 point favorites. It looks like Tennessee is going to be the underdog at home. Nonetheless, I think this should be a close game where you probably get the 49ers having to throw the ball. And our last wide receiver in this tier will be Michael Pittman going up against the Arizona Cardinals. With Michael Pittman, I think you could definitely make an argument to have him higher than this. Obviously, he disappointed us this past week in a brutal matchup against the New England Patriots. Honestly, that's on me. We should have told you to go through. We should have told you to bench Michael Pittman. He came away with 1.7 fantasy points. But Carson Wentz had 57 passing yards. It's just, I mean, the strength of that Patriots defense shut down this entire passing game. Arizona, another tough matchup. I know you had Detroit being able to move the ball down the field against them last week. I think that was a random game. I think Arizona is in a bounce back spot here. I mean, let's go through and let's look at the line in this game right now. And oh my God, this is supposed to be close. You actually have Arizona as 1 point favorites at home. I figured that was actually going to be a little bit of a wider spread. I apologize, Thomas. Can we throw Michael Pittman up to the top of this here? Can we throw Michael Pittman up to wide receiver 20? And then let's go to our next tier. Let's go over to Christian Kirk leading us off at wide receiver 24. Now with Christian Kirk, he came out and he was great against Detroit this past week. And I was wrong. I was telling people to go through and I was telling people to play AJ Green over Christian Kirk, thinking the loss of DeAndre Hopkins on the outside was going to favor the wide receiver that plays a little bit more on the outside. Looks like that may not be the case. Looks like Christian Kirk had double-digit targets this past week, operating in one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. I think Kirk is definitely a safe option to go to. And our wide receiver 25 will be Mike Williams. Mike Williams, obviously a deeper threat, very boom bust. The issue with Mike Williams here is the fact that I don't necessarily think this is going to be a game that you can classify as a shootout. Like, I would have been more excited about playing Mike Williams against the Kansas City Chiefs, knowing that Justin Herbert in this offense, they were going to have to take shots deep downfield if they wanted to have a shot to just keep up with that Kansas City Chiefs offense. I don't necessarily put Davis Mills in the same tier of quarterback as Patrick Mahomes, however. So I don't think the Chargers are going to be forced to push the ball down the field as they were last week. So I'm going to be less aggressive on Mike Williams. And then our wide receiver 26 is going to be Odell Beckham Jr. going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Don't want to speak on this. Odell is yet to play. We're going to have to sit here. We're going to have to wait until we get Odell Beckham Jr. most likely being the wide receiver 2 for Los Angeles against the Seattle Seahawks here. That's my assumption. And now let's go down to our next tier, guys. We're going to have Devonta Smith here at wide receiver 27 against the Giants. Looks like you should have Jalen Hurts playing this game, and we have not seen the Philadelphia Eagles play Washington just yet. I'm going to go back to the fact that I think Jalen Hurts is an elite level fantasy quarterback based on his rushing upside. But, I mean, as a passer, I don't necessarily think he's who you want for Devonta Smith. Wide receiver 28, we will have DJ Moore. Don't know if you're going to get Cam Newton. Don't know if you're going to get Sam Darnold this week, but I'm going to be worried about this offense nonetheless for the Carolina Panthers. We've discussed the fact that Cam Newton, he can be an effective fantasy quarterback based on his rushing upside, but I don't necessarily think that he's someone you want for DJ Moore. And our last wide receiver in this tier will be Darnell Mooney going up against the Seattle Seahawks. I hate to break it to you, Bears fans, but Justin Fields, Matt Nagy, they are both bad. I don't think you can put all the blame just on Matt Nagy. They're both looking like they're not the answer, and I think right now you have to be very much worried about the Chicago Bears offense. I mean, going through and looking at what we've had from the Bears as of late, I know we got a good game against the Green Bay Packers 2 weeks ago. They get a lucky 9 points, I want to say, this past week against the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, looking at the fact they got 13 against the Ravens, 16 against the Detroit Lions earlier this month as well. Probably going to be worried about Darnell Mooney. And our last wide receiver on this list, we're going to drop him down a tier. is going to be Russell Gage, wide receiver 30. With Russell Gage, he's been getting the consistent volume. Not only has he been getting the consistent volume, but it's also a nice matchup against the Detroit Lions, coming off a week where he had 11 targets, 8 receptions, 91 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. I think if you get a couple of your players in the COVID list, maybe you also add a player like Chris Godwin, I think Russell Gage could be a solid answer off the waiver wire. And I think that's all we got for y'all. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I really hope you got something from it. Please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, letting me know how stupid I am. Go check out some of those player props and some of those drafts on Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK when you sign up. Find the link in the description of the video. Find it in the comment section. I think that should be it. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.